the point I was going to make, going off of kind of what Brooks said, like so BLM and kind of these conversations happening, especially in Minnesota. So Minneapolis in 2021 had a mayoral election, and part of that they had a referendum on the police. So
Defunding
obviously,
the police.
so there was a defunding of the police. There was cutting of funding in the Minneapolis police force that led to basically higher crime. Now, and then there was also another aspect I learned too. Minneapolis, like MPD, is probably one of the worst police departments in the state. It seems.
And
So
you got to. I don't know how do you gauge that? How do you gauge that's the worst?
they're poorly funded, overworked, and also
Okay,
they are not
spread
properly
thin.
trained.
Okay.
I actually have so I know someone who sits on city council in a neighboring city who basically found out that multiple times their police department would go to Minneapolis not only as support but also help them in continuing education and training on like de-escalation and working crowd control stuff like that they didn't know how to do. Like there's literally the town over that town defunding the police as a message just does not resonate. You go over to Minneapolis, it resonates a lot more, just because the how their police is. So there's that. So you look at like, okay, so is it a problem of too much police, or is it just the police aren't getting the proper funding and training?
Yeah, that was what I was about to kind of ask you to kind of give a little
Yeah,
different context here. Is that we talk about when some of us talk about police brutality, police accountability, or something like that. If some of us are more on an anarcho-capitalist side, they'll probably default. To the idea of replace the police, or at least replace them with a private version of security,
right,
or something
right.
something like that, right? But I think a lot of them kind of just jumped forth into this defund the police thing without kind of having so much foresight. And so would you argue? So I think you just made your case here that it's due to the lack of funding that they aren't so well trained. They're more impulsive and probably end up doing more damage, as opposed to if they gotten training through that funding and so
Basically,
forth.
I mean, yeah, when you're looking at the government doing anything on a local level, some cases it can be good, and on a local level, some cases it's bad. There's cities that are definitely have a lot more privatization that works really well for them, and there's some cities where privatization is probably not the best. Um, One thing that actually so part of this vote after they were like defunding some of the police was basically the Minneapolis got to vote on disbanding the police. I don't know if you know that in 2021.
I think there was something I saw. Yeah.
So it was
Wait. There was a referendum to like completely eradicate the police.
to be replaced by a essentially an equal organization, like some sort of like peacekeeping, some sort of thing. It was basically some people call it like it was basic. What's his name? Who was the guy the cop that was charged with killing George Floyd?
Derek Chauvin? Is that his
Derek
name?
Chauvin.
Chauvin.
Derek
Right,
Chauvin.
Chauvin. Sorry.
There said, yeah, this basic. Someone used the phrase, Minneapolis is going to replace the police. It's basically Derek Chauvin with a nose ring and purple hair. It was going to be basically a sort of virtue signal.
The woke police.
It was essentially going to just be cops that would be disbanded here and rehired over here to do the same thing as some sort of publicity move to like, look, we replace the police with something more effective and sounds better. It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's all politics.
And it didn't pass, but it was like this move to, and of course people don't look into like how after the major move to remove the funding from the police in Minneapolis, a majority of those city council members resigned.
Resigned. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That.
And yeah, it's so there were a lot of things that they tried to do, and the real change that some people I've talked to in good faith really do believe, like police accountability, addressing zeroing in on like problematic police officers, like people found out there was some history between Derek Chauvin and George Floyd. Could that have contributed to it in some way? And it's like, not that obviously cops that have history shouldn't be a cop, but looking in and
I don't
making
know what
sure,
you do
like,
about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
no, I know, but like there's like I think, what was his name? Like all the podcasts after that, like I listened to, I don't know if you've heard of it, Brooke, the one that Rogan had with Jocko Willink, where he talked about like, here's what they do with the military. They should do the same thing with the cops, where it's like every few months you have like some break time, you have some time for continuing education, you change up things to like help them with their mental state. Like there's a communication with in his case with soldiers, but with police, where you're considering their mental health, their needs, their headspace to like how you move forward. Are you feeling good about being in this area? Are you, do you need to go somewhere else? Because sometimes what will happen, again, that overworked, underfunded cop is probably going to have problems. And from what we gathered, like it doesn't really get addressed all the time.
Right.
If a cop,
I'll comment one thing on that. I mean, what I've heard also has been a fallout, and you guys are there. I'm not in the country, guys, so you got to help me out. The demoralization of the police when that whole thing took place, right? What was it, like $2 billion in damages, and basically the government, the municipality basically threw the police under the bus. The good police officers I hear left. A lot of like you're saying, the lack of training and stuff. Those that actually had talent and stuff like that, I hear they were recruiting them all over the country, and a lot of the good ones probably left because why are you going to stand up for the city council that doesn't have your back at the end of the day? So what you were left with, you kind of left with the dregs, right? You're kind of left with the least appealing sort of thing. So this is a manufactured problem that the state in many ways created and encouraged. So I'm not surprised to hear this is the kind of fallout that that's kind of come from it. I'm glad to hear that the referendum failed, that the people of Minnesota kind of realize it's this is nonsense, this kind of fluff sort of thing. But it goes to what Amos was talking about, and I think VU was speaking about as well. In the politics and the narrative, especially with the media, it's probably always been this bad. In fact, there's a book out, I can't remember what it's called, going all the way back to World War I, when the press was used to basically push narratives, and they got it wrong. They've been consistently wrong. From World War I, World War II, Vietnam, everything, and they've always done it. Only within the last recent, couple decades, with the internet, with, conversations like this, podcasting and other things, people can now go and dissect the narratives and start to pull them apart, and we're finally probably getting to some truth. Now, much like the Matrix, most people are still plugged in. They're reading the mainstream and other things like that. They don't want to be unplugged. A few of us have escaped the Matrix in a sense, and we're having real conversations. But that culture isn't predominant.
Yeah.
So that's why even to this day in the UK, which has nothing to do with what's going on in the state of Minnesota, in the Twin Cities, that message resonates out here. And we still have politicians. We have the Conservatives and the Labour, so that would be like the Republicans and the Democrats. Our Labour leader, Keir Starmer, took a knee. There's a photo with him and his wife sitting in his office, and they took a knee with the whole BLM movement. And that was like a big photo op for them. This has nothing to do with us in the UK, right? It's just, but as you say, those narratives, that kind of mind virus and the need to be like, and the Twitter culture and all these things, people are kind of being bullied into following these things in a lot of ways.
Well, sure, because that's
the big fallout.
Yeah, like I was just thinking about the how information is transferred and how it's supposedly getting better in this day and age, but nobody still gets the nuance. I mean, here's the thing: that the methods, the technology, those may be getting better and are probably proliferating, but the content, it's this weird thing. The nuance is gone, but it likes to pretend that it is well nuanced. In the form of the fact checkers and such, the Snopes and the Facebook fact checkers and such. It's just so it's presuming
that. Yeah. It become Yeah, it's trying. What's ended up happening is, for the longest while, these institutions have basically controlled the narrative. So I think, like, back in the 50s and the 60s in the United States, it was, ABC, NBC, and CBS were like the big three, and everybody's listening to like Walter Cronkite and I don't know who the other hosts were and stuff. Everybody got the news from these guys.
Yeah.
That's not the world we live in anymore. We're now in this kind of what's the beginning of the distributed information age, where you can go to your particular podcast, you're listening to this channel, they've got this stream, whatever, and the old guard is collapsing and they're fighting back. And that's where you get all these fact checkers and, basically Ministry of Truth out of an Orwellian type setup, trying to hold on to power, trying to hold on to the control of the masses. It's ultimately going to fail, because every great institution that tries to control people throughout history, from the church and the empires and other things, they eventually do all collapse. So I'm hopeful, but we are in the midst of that turmoil right now. I mean, and especially with you guys in the US, it's you guys don't get arrested for jokes. We get arrested for jokes in the UK, so that's potentially what could happen.
I
But at
remember
least you
Count
guys
Dankula.
Count Dankula, yeah. And I mean, there are a number of those types of cases where misgendering has gotten people fired. A wrong tweet, liking a tweet, has gotten people fired. I don't think you guys have gotten that far yet, thank God for your First Amendment.
Well, not arrest anyway. There's still stigmatization. Like, do either of you guys play Magic the Gathering at all?
Oh, that's not my thing.
Are you I mean, like what? How like the cards are changing?
No. So so the cards have artists, right? And there's like different really good artists. And there was one artist called Therese Nielsen, who happens to be basically a lesbian, right? But on her Twitter page, she's liked conservative posts and like people like Sean Hannity and that kind of stuff, and she got really attacked for it. And apparently, she's not doing any new artwork for Wizards of the Coast and Magic the Gathering anymore. I think she was ousted.
Well,
cancel
culture.
Yeah.
Funny enough, Wizards of the Coast is also
Dungeons and Dragons.
Also owns Dungeons and Dragons, which I'm a big fan of myself. And we talked about this, how like, especially during the pandemic, they really pushed for this, which was Dungeons and Dragons now has to be. I forgot exactly what the wording was. It was like it was pretty obvious. It was not like straight up saying we're going woke, but it was like
close enough.
It was something along those lines, like we're going this direction. Where
more inclusive tends to be, the coded language.
Yeah, it started getting into stuff, and I actually, unfortunately, I lost a friend over this. Where
really?
I was making some friends in Dungeons and Dragons, and we had this discussion. I sent him something that I thought was just funny, because like the whole move of cancel culture and all this. I sent him an article. It was like Daily Mail. It was a screenshot of a Daily Mail article saying like, Chess Federation reconsidering the color of chess pieces black and white. Something like that. And he was a chess player. And he's like, is this really supposed to... He got upset because he thought I was like, trolling, trying to like stir something up. And I'm like...
Which you probably were on something,
I am, but it's like, I send that to you, not to fight with you. But like, we're going to laugh and talk about it, maybe go in a direction, and we're done with it. He took it personally, thought I was like just using him to like have fun and joke and troll, and then we started talking about Dungeons and Dragons a bit, and I'm like, this is the same thing. Like when I'm looking at like characters, so like in Dungeons and Dragons, you're playing like a human or an elf or something like that. You're playing all these different races. Well, Wizards of the Coast recognizes up to like 60 different races in the game. Which is fine, you want to go play this, it's fine. There's like, it's choice for everyone. Yeah. But it turned it into like where, you cannot, now we're not allowed to like view certain races as inherently good or evil.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
Yeah, like the thing was, in the original like 5 or 6 races, it was always like, there's a spread of certain types of moral, or like, the alignments they had in Dungeons and Dragons. And the thing about humans was they could literally be anything, because we're humans. We could literally be anything we want. But there was like some, like each race was supposed to be a facet of like humanity, really. If I look at like, you watch Lord of the Rings, every race, even like the orcs and the trolls, it's all a facet of humanity, both good and bad, depending upon how you look at it. It wasn't meant to be commentary on racism or classism or all these other things. Maybe in some, you think like, oh, elves think they're better than anyone, so that's like arrogance in humans or whatever.
Yeah.
You can look at all that, but it's not meant to be like, it's both commentary, but it's fantasy. It's not meant to be taken as like the author's intention to make a statement. It's just, let's explore this stuff. Elves and dwarves hate each other for whatever reason. So then people were saying, like there was like the dark elves, they're called the drow. Well, that, why do they have to be evil when they're darker skinned? Why do orcs have to be evil because they look a certain way? And it's like, because in the game, in this world, there's good gods and evil gods, and they all create their own people. And so if an evil god creates his race, they're evil. That's not commentary, that's just the world they're in. That could represent an aspect of humanity because there are bad people. And that's the thing. We don't understand. They lack the acknowledgement that humans are very capable of very good and very bad things. Like, Nazis are bad, but we can never, ever, ever acknowledge the fact that on a given bad day, bad life choices, bad circumstances, anyone is fully capable of being just as bad as someone like Hitler, or just as good as, I don't know, someone like Jesus. Like, it's a spectrum, because we're humans. We're very much susceptible to what's around us. But no one understands that. They want to say, no, we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. And because we're the good guys, we can't, we're not okay with understanding how bad or evil comes about. That's that thought process.
This kind of idea that if I was in Nazi Germany, I would have fought them tooth and nail.
Yeah.
Everybody
or,
thinks that.
Yeah. Or if I was if I was back in Civil War era America, I would totally be an abolitionist. And it's like, yeah, and there were abolitionists, but the abolitionists of that time could be like certain types of people today. How would the world, again, that's that presentism sort of thinking of, imagine in 100 years from now, people are going to look at us. How could those Americans be okay with all that slavery happening in Africa right now?
Or the Middle East.
Yeah, there are, technically, there's more slaves today than ever before in history.
Yep.
And the world in the future would look at us and go, look at them. They were horrible people. They just let that happen. It's like, what do you want me to do? Fly over there now and fight? It's like, if I was back then, I would fight all the slavery in Africa. It's like,
it's even worse than that in a sense, right?
Yeah.
So to get to your point, that everybody's claiming, oh yes, America's racist, the UK is racist, and so, never mind, the UK has a fantastic history fighting slavery, etc., etc., etc. Not to say that we're any better or that we didn't have problems, but that's a whole other story. There are places you could go today and experience real racism. Right?
Asia.
There are places I was about to say places in Asia, places in the Middle East. You take a view in the Hapa subreddit and you can see the cultural clash. And I think that there are videos of when the Olympics were hosted in places like in China and other things, where some of the African triathletes and others were showing up, and they are saying racial slurs, shouting openly on the streets towards the bus as the athletes are coming out, right? As you would know, V, in Japan, there are places foreigners of any kind are not permitted to go, just straight up.
Basically.
And if you're born, say, mixed race, as you say, like Hafu, between the two, the Japanese culture, for instance, will not fully accept a person who's not 100% Japanese.
They won't.
So, to put that on the West, these Twitter warriors and others who are saying, oh yeah, racism, they don't really know. Yeah. And they've never really experienced that type of racism.
Anyone that comes here, any race, any creed, whatever, they show up here and people want to talk about like, the racism. Like, is there racism in the U.S.? Of course there is. Is it on the level of some of these other countries? No. You come here, you make something of yourself. You have a family, you have a house, you have like roots, right? Yeah, some people are still not gonna like you, but it's not like they're gonna like revoke your citizenship. It's not like they're not gonna accept you in like public places or certain like institutions, clubs or anything, unless there's like certain rules or whatever. But like over in like Japan, that's one thing. Cause so I'm watching, like I keep up with PewDiePie, and
he just moved to Japan.
Yeah. So he's there now. And there's some other people that we know that have been in Japan, and they're like, yeah, you could go there, literally make millions of dollars. You could have all the places you want to live in. You can live somewhere, everything's great. But it's like there's this whole custom, like, you could have all the money, and you still might not get approved to rent a place in certain areas of the city. You might not be allowed, granted certain levels of credit or, ability to buy a house, buy a car, have a license, things like that, because you're a foreigner. You could essentially be a citizen on paper through and through. But there's institutions that can just say no to you. Whereas here, you could sue someone for that. Like, even in the worst case where someone is blatantly racist to you, you can still sue them, and that's that. Like, for example, in a similar situation, just considering the institutional stuff, what's her name? Kim something. It was that lady who refused to give a gay marriage certificate in that one area. Remember that one? She went to jail. There was a lady in some town, I think it was like down south, where it was
a marriage certificate or something.
Yeah, to a gay couple, and she refused, and I think it was like Huckabee or something was like rallying behind her, like freedom to like not do that or something. And then she like went to jail, but then it let her go, and it was this whole thing. Like, yeah, it was a whole fiasco, but like someone still had to give them a certificate, like, because it's their right. Now, you go to Japan, and it's like not like gay marriage, but like you have similar things of like, well, yeah, I'm a citizen, I should have these rights. You could still be told no to certain things. Whereas here, it's like,
just for the record, gay marriage is still illegal in Japan.
It is, okay. So, but I'm talking about like, I'm talking about like just here we could basically argue rights and privileges and things to like get what we want, because like our society still honors that. Over there, you could do everything right, get all the paperwork in order, and they could still say no because you're a foreigner. What are you going to do? Sue them for that? Like, no, it's not going to go.
Yeah. Like in any given Asian country, a constant I keep on hearing is the idea of cultural identity, and I know and race is very integrated into that cultural identity, as if more dilution is to dilute that whole cultural identity. So we're so worried about those who are more sensitive to cultural identity here in the West, but it's nothing like the East.
That's true.
Yeah.